Hey everybody, it's Chris, and I have started my series where I'm going over a class's subclasses and giving them ratings. I'm currently doing the Paladin, and my first video I covered the Oath of Glory Paladin. And what I kind of decided was, and I don't know if this is going to be the case for all the classes, but at least for the Paladin, what I decided impulsively was I was going to present them in the order that I figured mechanically from the weakest to mechanically the strongest, in my opinion. And this is before I actually go through and deep analyze these things. So we'll see at the end if my actual star rating matches up with my previous impressions or not. I think it will. But basically, what I do is I take all the levels that they get subclass features, and I give them a rating from 1 star being the lowest to 5 stars being the highest, compared to other Paladin subclasses. And I don't just compare them to other players' handbook subclasses, I compare them to all the subclasses. And once I've done all the players' handbook subclasses, then I'll do a final video for ratings where I rate them against all the subclasses. So I'm going to look at subclasses from previous sources and give those ratings, and level by level we'll add it all together and see how everything ranks against each other. Then I will do a video for multi-classing your Paladin, and then we'll move on to the next class, which I haven't decided what it will be yet. My normal route, and I think the way I'm going to continue going forward, is I do a poll. So watch my channel, because as we get closer to the end of the series, I'll do a poll for what class to cover next. But right now, I'm going to cover Oath of Ancients, which means that Oath of Glory, I think, is mechanically weakest. Oath of Ancients, I think, is the next mechanically weakest. And that doesn't mean I think either class or subclass is weak. I just think that compared to the other subclasses in the player's handbook, they aren't quite as strong. All right, so Oath of the Ancients is covered next. It says, preserve life and light in the world. The Oath of Ancients is as old as the first elves. Paladins who swear this oath cherish the light. They love the beautiful and life-giving things of the world more than any principles of honor, courage, and justice. They often adorn their armor and clothing with images of growing things, leaves, antlers, or flowers to reflect their commitment to the preserving life and light. These paladins share the following tenets: kindle the light of hope, shelter life, delight in art and laughter. So thematically, I think the Oath of Ancients is very strong. If you are playing a character, I just did, in fact, a build that was an Oath of Ancients Paladin, straight classed, which I will link up above. And the idea of that build was I wanted a Paladin that felt kind of like a ranger. If you want a Paladin that feels like a ranger, Oath of Ancients is the way to go. If you want a Paladin that feels a little bit like a druid, Oath of Ancients is the way to go. If you want a non-elf character to feel a little bit like an elf, Oath of Ancients is the way to go. I think thematically, very good stuff here. But let's look at the mechanics. So we're going to start at level 3. Now, Oath of Glory was unique at level 3 in that they technically get 3 features at level 3, though I didn't think any of them were fantastic, and certainly one of them I thought was pretty weak. But with Oath of Ancients and the other 2 Paladin subclasses, we're going to get 2 features at level 3. So let's start with Nature's Wrath. It says, as a magic action, you can expand 1 use of your channel divinity to conjure spectral vines around nearby creatures. Each creature of your choice, so no friendly fire, that you can see within 15 feet of yourself must succeed on a strength saving throw or have the restrained condition for 1 minute. A restrained creature repeats the save at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. I should first acknowledge, before I get into this and start dragging it a bit, I should first acknowledge this is way better than the 2014 version. The 2014 version was against 1 creature. So, yeah, definitely better because we can hit multiple creatures with this. I still don't think it's great. Okay, so first thing, 15 feet around yourself is still a pretty limited area of effect. I mean, if you're just surrounded by enemies, yeah, great. But that doesn't happen all that often. I would think most of the time We could probably get 1, 2, maybe 3 creatures with this if we're lucky. I think if we can get 3 creatures with it, it's a lot better. But I would imagine most of the time we use this, we might get 2 creatures. I'd never do it against 1. And then basically they make their save. If they make it, nothing happens, right? And if they fail, they're restrained, which is great, but they have to fail. And we have to use our magic action, and we're a paladin. And so that means we're not attacking. We don't get to make weapon attacks on that turn. So we are sacrificing our attack action in order to do this. And that also means no bonus action for things like smiting, right? So the things that paladins are specialized for, you give them up in order to do this. That really hurts. So the magic action here, when I just think about playing a paladin, it's just too much. And when I actually did play the Oath of Ancients Paladin, I never used this feature. And that meant I never used my Channel Divinity at all, because this was my only option for using Channel Divinity. Now, at level 9, I believe, is when you get Abjure Foes with Paladins, and then you get another use of your Channel Divinity that is significantly better than this. So if you go enough levels, you'll have another use for your Channel Divinity, but this is your only option with Oath of Ancients until that time. And yeah, I never felt that it was worth it to give up my action to take this magic action. Especially considering that there are ways I can take my attack action and still restrain foes, which we'll be going over very soon here. So I still don't love this. Yes, it's better than it was, and I appreciate that, and it's not terrible. I think it's on the weak side. If I'm looking at the other level 3 features for Paladins, it is on the weak side. I think this might actually be potentially weaker than the Glory Paladin's temporary hit point feature. All right? But anyway, that's Nature's Wrath. If you disagree, let me know. Maybe you've caught 10 creatures with it, and they were all restrained, and it was fantastic. I don't think that's going to happen very often. You know, if that happened to you, I think you're a very rare case. Then we get to the Oath of Ancient Spells, and this is better, okay? So the Oath of Ancient Spells are actually pretty good overall, but not necessarily all that strong at level 3. First thing we're going to get is level 3, we get Ensnaring Strike and Speak with Animals. Now, Ensnaring Strike, the build I presented, I used Ensnaring Strike, and the reason I used it is, number 1, I wanted to feel a bit like a ranger, but number 2, Ensnaring Strike, unlike any of the smite spells, does work with ranged attacks, and I wanted to do ranged attacks with that character. But assuming that we're actually going to play a more stereotypical Paladin, and the kind of character that Paladin leans into in terms of its abilities, then Ensnaring Strike now suddenly comes up against all the smite spells. And it does not compare. The smite spells, level 1 smite spells, none of them use concentration. Ensnaring Strike does. The level 1 smite spells, they all do damage before anything else. Ensnaring Strike does not. If they make their saving throw against Ensnaring Strike, it does nothing. And then, in addition to that, those smite spells usually have a secondary effect. And there's higher level smite spells that are better yet, of course. So Ensnaring Strike, I just think, doesn't compare unless it's our only option, which it is if we're doing a ranged attack. So I don't think it's a great addition for 95% of Paladins. My Paladin that I presented was that 5%, that rare exception, where Ensnaring Strike was the only option. Then we have Speak with Animals. Now, I do appreciate that Speak with Animals is a ritual, because if you are playing a half-caster like a Paladin, those spell slots should just have a lot fewer of them than full casters do, except potentially the Warlock, depending on how you look at invocations. But yeah, you definitely have fewer spell slots than sorcerers or wizards or druids or bards or clerics, and so when you can cast a spell that doesn't use a spell slot, that is very good. Speak with Animals, of course, is thematic to the subclass as well, so I get that as well. But let's not pretend Speak with Animals is a super great first level spell. It's an okay first level spell. It's utility and thematic, and I appreciate it's here. I don't think we've increased our power level all that much. I should mention, by the way, Ensnaring Strike, if we do use it in melee, it also is competition for the one channel divinity option we had. But anyway, then we get to level 5, and things get way better. Because we get Misty Step, which is a great spell. Love Misty Step. And Moonbeam, which is a great spell. I love Moonbeam. Neither of them are like super ideal for a paladin. Okay? So I'm going to explain why. We'll start with Moonbeam. That's the easier one. Moonbeam is going to use your action to cast, and it is going to use your action on most turns afterwards, maybe every turn afterwards, because it takes an action to move it, and you probably are going to need to move it. That said, if you expend your actions, Moonbeam is a good spell, but if we are using our actions to just control a Moonbeam, then we're not taking the attack action, so we're basically competing with a full spellcaster who might cast Moonbeam like a druid, except we're casting at a lower level, meaning we're doing less damage, and we really have no benefit compared to them. So it's probably just worse than if cast with a full caster, and the various advantages we have for being a half caster don't come up, right? We've given them up in order to cast Moonbeam. That said, it creates versatility with a subclass that it otherwise wouldn't have, so I definitely appreciate that. These kinds of spells, paladins normally don't have access to, and if you were going to have one of these kinds of spells, Moonbeam is a good one to have. So I do think it's still a good spell for Oath of Ancients to have, but it's not perfect for this class, okay? Then we go to Misty Step, and Misty Step is almost my number one go-to at level 2 is Misty Step, but now we got to talk about the Paladin again, so I'm going to bring up something else on the screen here. All right. Also at level 5, Paladins are going to get Faithful Steed. This is every Paladin base class feature. You can call on the aid of an otherworldly steed. You always have the Find Steed spell prepared. You can also cast a spell once without expending a spell slot, and you gain the ability to do so when you finish a long rest. Let's bring up Find Steed. Okay, so here's Find Steed. It is a one-action cast, and I emphasize that because it didn't used to be, and it kind of filtered our perception on how this spell works, because we assumed it's an out-of-combat spell. Not necessarily an out-of-combat spell anymore. You could potentially do it in combat. Range 30 feet, instantaneous duration. You summon an otherworldly being that appears as a loyal steed in an unoccupied space of your choice within range. You control it. You get the idea. But now let's look at the stat block. So here is the otherworldly steed. We can see that its speed is 60 feet. And if we have a 4th or higher level spell that we're casting it with, or spell slot we're casting it with, has a fly speed of 60 feet. So if you want Misty Step for mobility, then I would point out that if we are on our otherworldly steed, we have more mobility than Misty Step could possibly give us. Because that otherworldly steed, I mean, it can take the dash action while we take our regular action. That's 120 feet of movement. So that's a lot more movement than Misty Step. The second thing I'll point out is the bonus actions, Fey Step. So this is if we choose the Fey option for our Found Steed, and I mean thematically, if I'm Oath of Ancients, that's what I'm picking. But in realistically, I always choose Fey. Always choose Fey. It's just way better. Okay, so Fey Step. The steed teleports along with its rider to an unoccupied space of your choice up to 60 feet away from itself. So double the movement of Misty Step, and it brings along the rider. In fact, what you can do is if you don't have Misty Step, but you really need to do something like a Misty Step with a Paladin, is you can use one action, and you can cast Find Steed. If you haven't cast it yet that day, it's free, no spell slot required. Otherwise, you got to spend a 2nd level spell slot, the same as a Misty Step. Take half your movement to mount the steed, and then it can Fey Step as its bonus action. And yes, then you have given up an action instead of a bonus action, and that does hurt more. But still, we have a lot of options here. And yes, this can only work once per day per steed. So we can dismiss the steed, cast another one, teleport again. Okay, so just mobility for paladins is so good once you get to level 5. And so Misty Step also, in the old rules, if you targeted yourself with a spell, your steed could also benefit from that spell. So if you targeted yourself with a Misty Step, it could go with you. That's not the case anymore. These bonus actions are basically replacing that feature. So if we Misty Step and we are mounted, then we don't bring our mount with us. Now, fair enough to say that, hey, I'm not going to be mounted all the time. I get that. Some cases, you just can't even fit a mount. They're large size. So we're in a narrow hallway, and we want a Misty Step. Fine Steed isn't necessarily going to help us. But most of the time it does. Most of the time, you can at least use an action right now to get on a steed, get to where you need to go, and you don't have to worry. The mount's going to die. Well, that's fine. It's already done what it was supposed to do. So I still like Misty Step. I still like it on a Paladin, but I like it less because there are other ways to accomplish what it does. I guess that's what I want to point out. For the same cost of a second level spell slot, and maybe not even that. That was a long time to talk about 5th level spells. Let's go, or 5th level extra spells. Let's talk about 9th level and extra spells. Plant Growth, super happy to see this here. Yes, it's an action to cast, but Plant Growth is one of those spells where if you have the right terrain and the right kind of enemies, it is just unbeatable. It's one of the best spells in the game, and no concentration, and it lasts forever. So Plant Growth is also very circumstantial because you need the right kind of terrain. So it's not a spell that's easy to fit on your preparations list. So if you can get it for free, and it's not a Paladin spell normally, that's great. Protection from Energy, I talked about in my last video. Protection from Energy, I think it's a big disappointment that they didn't remove concentration from it. It's not very good. On to the 13th level, Ice Storm. Now, Paladins do not have a lot of one action cast, blast, and it's over instantaneous effects. Ice Storm is one of those spells, area of effect damage, but it is one of the weaker of the area of effect blast spells. So, although I appreciate having that versatility at level 13, your allies, the sorcerer or the wizard or whatever next to you, has 7th level spells, and they're not casting Ice Storm. They have Fireball, which is probably even better than Ice Storm, even cast with the 3rd level slot. So, yeah, it's okay to have here, but it's on the weak side. Stone Skin, I'm not a huge fan of Stone Skin. They did technically improve it in the 2024 rules. The old version, it only worked against non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. They got rid of that, fortunately. But nevertheless, it's still concentration to last an hour, and it uses up a 100 gold piece material component every time you cast it. And also, it gives you resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. But whenever the spell actually does anything, that meant you took damage, and now you're making concentration saves for it. Maybe like Protection from Energy, this should have been one that concentration was removed. Level 17, very good. Commune with Nature is a fantastic ritual. And at level 5 spells, I want rituals with half-casters for sure. So that's a really nice spell to have. And Tree Stride, it's a teleport, right? And it's fairly limited. It's not a great teleport, to be honest. But overall, this is still a pretty good list. Misty Step and Moonbeam, I talked about them a lot, about why they're not quite as good on a Paladin, but they're still decent spells, even for a Paladin. Plant Growth is a good spell. Ice Storm, I appreciate the versatility it gives. Commune with Nature is a strong ritual. Speak with Animals isn't bad. It's okay. This is not a bad list. But I put this together along with what I think is a below average feature for Nature's Wrath, and I can only give 2 stars to level 3 for Oath of Ancients. So here we are, right where the Oath of Glory was. So that takes us to level 7 and our aura improvement. And with Oath of Ancients, of course, we had a big change. So we have Aura of Warding that used to give us resistance to the damage from spells, and everyone in our aura got resistance to all the damage from spells. They kind of got away from doing resistance to things other than the damage types or conditions, right? But if it's a damage resistance now, it is based on a damage type rather than a situation. So they did that with Aura of Warding as well. Ancient magic lies so heavily upon you that it forms an eldritch ward, blunting energy from the material plane. You and your allies have resistance to necrotic, psychic, and radiant damage while in your aura of protection. So if you get hit with a fireball now, no resistance. Still, this is 3 resistances that you have permanently and your allies have circumstantially. 3. Now, radiant, is probably, if you are a PC, radiant might be the damage type you take the least. Not that way for our enemies, especially since we're a paladin, but most enemies don't deliver radiant damage. Psychic is a little more common. Necrotic is a lot more common. Necrotic is actually fairly common, especially as we get into higher levels. It becomes more and more common. So necrotic is really good. And it's still 3 damage types, and it's all the time. And we're giving it to our allies when they're close enough to us. This is above average still. I still think this is an above average aura, and it's worth 4 stars. And I will point out that there are a lot of cases where this is going to come up. In fact, when I played that character that was an Oath of Ancients Paladin, the resistance to psychic damage came up, and it wouldn't have come up if it had been resistance to the damage of spells, because it wasn't a spell. All right, so this is where this is actually better, is in some cases the damage we're taking is not from spells. And we see this more and more with creatures that have different attacks that aren't all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, that can deliver a wallop, and they're not spells. So we're going to have protection against 3 of the damage types. I think that's still pretty good. All right, and that brings us up to level 15. And at level 15, we get Undying Sentinel. When you are reduced to 0 hit points and not killed outright, you can drop to 1 hit point instead. You gain a number of hit points equal to 3 times your Paladin level. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. Additionally, you can't be aged magically, and you cease visibly aging. All right, so starting with the last part, ribbon, right? Just thematic. Not being aged magically, not visibly aging does not matter at all mechanically. So what we have here is the ability once, when we drop to 0 hit points, we cannot drop to 0 hit points, and instead, we regain a number of hit points equal to 3 times our Paladin level, which is a fair amount. But I want to put that amount in perspective. All right? So 3 times our Paladin level. You know how many hit points we get from just being a Paladin with every level? 6. And we get 10 at level 1. That's before Constitution modifier or tough feat or anything else. So 3 times our Paladin level is automatically going to be a little bit less than half of our total hit points if we have a Constitution of 10. If we have a Constitution of 12 or higher, it'll be less than that. And if we have a Constitution of 14, which I got to think is pretty standard for most Paladins, it's about a third. It's a little bit more than a third of our total hit points we're getting back. That's still a lot better than getting 1 hit point. But let's at least be realistic with the amount of hit points we're getting back. It's a portion of our hit points, but probably less than half. Okay? And it's once per long rest. And it's our level 15 feature. So this isn't useless by any means, but it's not that great. And frankly, I had no problem giving this 2 stars. And it was nowhere near 3 stars. So we were going on a bit of a roller coaster with Oath of Ancients. 2 stars, 4 stars, back down to 2 stars. And then we get our capstone. Okay, so let's bring up the capstone. Here it is. All right, Elder Champion. As a bonus action, you can imbue your Aura of Protection with primal power. granting the benefits below for 1 minute or until you end them. No action required. Notice I bolded 1 minute, and this is to remind me to point out that the other 3 subclasses in the player's handbook for Paladin all have a bonus action, capstone, but theirs lasts for 10 minutes. This one only lasts for 1 minute. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. You can also restore your use of it by expending a 5th level spell slot, no action required. This is standard with the 2024 rules. Now, the older subclasses don't have this, but you could always ask your DM about that. But for the new subclasses, this is standard. Then we get 3 features. Diminish Defiance. Enemies in the aura have disadvantage on saving throws against your spells and channel divinity options. Regeneration. At the start of each of your turns, you regain 10 hit points. Swift Spells. Whenever you cast a spell that has a casting time of an action, you can cast it using a bonus action instead. So, bonus action spells that everyone has disadvantage against, plus we regenerate. Wow. But okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because, boy, that reads so good. But I'm going to pour a little bit of water on the fire, all right? Swift Spells. Whenever you cast a spell that has a casting time of an action, you can cast it using a bonus action instead. First thing I'll point out is Paladins have a large suite of bonus action spells. They're already bonus actions. Some of their spells are actions, and sure, it's nice to be able to cast them as a bonus action. But with a 1 minute duration, I am going to assume that most of the time, Elder Champion is something we are going to do on round 1 of a combat. So if we use our bonus action to activate Elder Champion, then we can't use Swift Spells because we've already used our bonus action. So this isn't a benefit we even see at all until round 2. Diminish Defiance. Enemies in the aura have disadvantage on saving throws against your spells and channel divinity options. So the first thing I'll point out is not a spell we cast with a bonus action on round 1. Maybe a spell we cast with a bonus action on round 2. But if we use this on round 1, it means we've used our action to cast a spell. So the obvious synergy between Diminish Defiance and Swift Spells doesn't come into play on round 1. The second thing to keep in mind is we are a Paladin level 20, so no multiclass. So what spells do we have? Well, we have Paladin spells, and we have up to 5th level Paladin spells, and we're level 20. So we are not the offensive or control caster that the spellcasters in the party are, and the gap has never been as big as it is at level 20. That said, a 5th level command spell is still good, even at level 20, and you give everyone disadvantage on their saving throws. That's still good. So Diminished Defiance is still good, but I just want to point out that we are a Paladin, we're level 20, we're not multi-classed, okay? And look at the Paladin spell list and just how many spells are really going to benefit from Diminished Defiance, because the Paladin spell list is a lot of healing and a lot of buffing and a lot of non-saving throw damage boosts. And Diminished Defiance doesn't really do anything for those. And then we have Regeneration. At the start of each of our turns, we regain 10 hit points. Not on round 1, because on round 1, we have to use our bonus action to set this up. And now the start of our turn is over. So we're not going to see our first benefit from this until round 2. So there's 2 parts of this we don't even see any benefit from until round 2. And the first part we only see a benefit from on round 1 if we're willing to expend our action to cast a spell, which means we're not doing the attack action. That said, it's still great. It's still worth 4 stars. But I just want to point out it's not quite as powerful as it sounds when you first read it. You start thinking about it, and it is limited, so it's not 5 stars. This is why it only gets 4 stars. But it's still good. And so the roller coaster ride is complete, and at least we end on a high note, because it's 2 stars, then 4 stars, then 2 stars, then 4 stars, and Oath of Ancients ends up being average. However, average eventually, because it's unfortunate that our level 3 features grant us 2 stars, because that means that from levels 3, 4, 5, and 6, we're going to feel a little bit weaker than other Paladin subclasses for the most part. Unless, the guy next to us is Oath of Glory. And then at level 7, we catch up. And then at level 15, we drop behind again. And then not until level 20 do we catch up. But in the long run, it is average. And that's a little bit like what we saw with Oath of Glory, but with Oath of Glory, it was a more even, slow start, strong finish. But that is the Oath of Ancients. Again, this is not a weak subclass. Overall, it ends up being average, but the way that the stars come out when we get those good features, it ends up playing catch up a little bit. But Paladin is strong. This is not weak. So if you want to play the Oath of Ancients, you'll do fine. I played Oath of Ancients, and I was quite happy with it. But I just need to acknowledge that if I look at the mechanics of the subclass and I compare it to the mechanics of the other subclasses in the Player's Handbook that I'm going to be covering next, Oath of Vengeance and Oath of Devotion, it's not as strong. So that's just the way it is. So that is the Oath of Ancients. Tell me what you think about it and what I got wrong. Otherwise, until next time. Oh, and which one's next? Oath of Vengeance or Oath of Devotion? Which of those do I think is stronger? Make your prediction. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.